If you're tired of overgiving, of shrinking yourself to be chosen, of feeling like love, peace, or abundance is something you have to earn, I want you to know this. You're not broken. You're just unpracticed in believing you matter. There is a way to live differently, and this is exactly why I created You Matter, an 8-week, soul-deep course to help you remember your worth, reclaim your power, and rewrite every relationship in your life, starting with the one you have with yourself. Enrollment is now open. You can find more information on my website, www.lindsaymorlock.com. Come walk with me on this journey, and I'll show you how your worthiness was never up for debate. The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Guided Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and today we're diving into part 2 of a 2-part transmission on what it means to settle for breadcrumbs of connection and what it finally takes to stop. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and start there because that's where I share the real lived story behind this episode. What I experienced in a former relationship that revealed so much about my own patterns of overgiving and silence and avoidance of vulnerability and settling for less than I truly deserved, no less settling for less than what I truly desired. In that episode, I talk about the moment I finally spoke up for what I needed and how that truth wasn't met and what unfolded in the aftermath as a result. The grief, the choice to move on with integrity, and a deeper reckoning I had to finally face around why I had stayed silent for so long. I also named the ache of realizing that sometimes the love and closeness we long for just isn't available in a particular relationship, but how devastating it can still be to grieve not just the person, but the fantasy of who we hoped they might become or the fantasy of the connection we actually longed for. And so in this second part of this transmission, we're diving even deeper, not into the story itself, but into the conscious awareness it brought me, the soul truths, the patterns underneath the pain, the shame, the proving, the hunger for connection that so many of us carry when we've been wired to believe that love is something we have to earn. So take a breath, settle in, because today is about the integration. Because after every reckoning comes the opportunity to understand ourselves more deeply. And what I came to realize through both that relationship dynamic and so many others in my life that presented me with a similar mirror is this. When you grow up with inconsistent emotional presence, when love had to be earned or caretakers were overwhelmed or absent or emotionally unavailable, your nervous system learns that scarcity is normal. You learn that emotional distance is what connection feels like, that being ignored or unseen is part of being in relationship. So we settle for crumbs because crumbs are all we've known. And somewhere along the way, we internalize this loop, this thinking that if I'm just helpful enough, patient enough, selfless enough, maybe then I'll be chosen. Maybe then I'll be seen. Maybe then I'll matter. I know because this is the loop I lived in. And for me, overgiving became the survival strategy. If I could just make myself invaluable, then maybe I'd finally feel valued. Not just for what I could offer, but for who I really was. I wasn't consciously afraid of people exiting my life. But when love was withheld, I felt it as abandonment. And that's the thing. Abandonment isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's the ache of being in the same room with someone and still feeling alone. And still, I stayed in low-nourishment relationship dynamics out of fear. Because even when we're emotionally starving, we cling to the scraps. We think, well, at least I have something. At least I'm not alone. But I've come to learn being alone is not the same as being lonely. And being in a connection that malnourishes your spirit is far lonelier than being in your own company. That's a sacred boundary I now hold. I will not pour into a well that does not nourish me in return. But to understand how not to do that, I had to learn how to recognize how the pattern of overgiving was even showing up in my life. And as I began to unpack this, I learned that overgiving isn't just about how much you do for others. It's about the energy beneath it. It's the why that's driving the motive behind your yes. For me, it absolutely looked like acts of service, anticipating needs before anyone asked, inserting myself before my help was requested, managing the invisible labor behind the scenes, being the one who quietly held things together. But overgiving doesn't stop at action. It lives in motive. It lives in the nervous system. It lives in that wounded part of us that's still trying to earn love. So overgiving, it's giving from guilt, from pressure, from a sense of obligation. It's giving out of a fear of rejection. It's giving because you fear losing your seat at the table and not belonging. It's giving because the absence of connection feels scarier than the effort. It's giving because you feel responsible for how someone else feels. It's giving in hopes someone will finally see your value. It's giving when you're depleted, yet you're still saying yes. Giving as a way to feel needed, to feel chosen, or to feel relevant. Giving because receiving feels unfamiliar or unsafe. It's giving when your body is saying no, but your mouth is still offering that yes. It looks generous, but it's a form of self-abandonment. It's giving rooted in performance, not presence. It's love without boundaries. It's effort without reciprocity. And it's care without inner alignment. And that's what I had to wake up to within myself. Because the question wasn't, am I doing too much? The real questions I had to ask myself were, is what I'm giving aligned with love or entangled with fear? Is it coming from overflow or is it coming from emptiness? True generosity does not drain you. It nourishes you. It expands you. It brings you joy. It's sacred. It's that kind of giving I'm learning to return to. But often, low self-worth breeds a compulsion to prove. Prove that you're good enough. Prove that you're lovable. Prove that you're worthy. Prove that you matter. So we contort. We shapeshift. We overfunction. We silence our needs. We dim our light. And what we're really saying underneath all of that giving is, please see me. Please love me. Please choose me. And it's an exhausting loop that never brings the intimacy we long for. Because somewhere deep down, we believe that we have to earn love instead of simply receiving it. But in this, we have to name what often lives underneath the overgiving, underneath the proving, the staying, the silence. Most of the time, what lurks beneath that surface? It's shame. Shame that says you're too much, you're not enough, that you don't get to have needs, that you're too emotional, too dramatic, too unstable. And to avoid those labels, I shrank. I made myself small. I made myself not have any needs. I tried to become whoever or whatever I thought the other person needed me to be, hoping that maybe then I'd be enough to be chosen in relationships. Maybe then I'd be lovable. Maybe then someone else would want to offer me in return what I offer them. But shame convinces us to accept scraps because it tells us it's all we deserve. Or worse yet, it tells us it's all we can get. And part of what I've learned is that connection without vulnerability isn't connection. It's coexisting. In that old relationship, I wasn't let in. Not really. I never felt like I was invited into their inner world. And in return, I don't think they ever really knew mine. It was a mutual lack of vulnerability. And that's what made it so unfulfilling. Because I was trying, I was leaning in, I was challenging and encouraging myself to show up more fully, to take the risk to be vulnerable, to let myself be seen. And I kept telling myself, if I go first, maybe she'll meet me there. But she didn't. And that's what hurt the most. Not just the absence of depth, but the absence of effort to build it. Sometimes we choose emotionally unavailable people because it protects us from the risk of being fully seen. It allows us to avoid vulnerability. Because if I never really say what I want, if I never really name my needs in a relationship, if I never show up fully in my vulnerability, then I can't be fully rejected. That was true for me. Staying silent felt like safety, but it was also a way of avoiding truth. It became a way of delaying my own clarity about this dynamic, because naming what I really wanted meant risking that I wouldn't receive it. And risking not getting it meant that I had to confront something tender and uncomfortable, that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the problem. But if I wasn't the problem, then I also wasn't in control of the solution. And that meant wrestling with the truth that some people simply aren't capable, willing, or ready to offer what you want or deserve. And even harder than that was accepting that some people don't love you for who you truly are. They love you as they want you to be, for what you give, for how you show up, for how your presence makes them feel. Because when all you're offering is your love, your time, your energy, your resources, your truth, and nothing's coming back, that's when you start to feel invisible. That's when the breadcrumbs stop feeling like enough. So here's my loving cosmic call out. In a world that is overflowing with distractions, where we scroll mindlessly through our feeds, binge watch to numb out, and fill every moment with work and schedules and noise, where we do instead of be, where we effort instead of connect, what kind of presence are we really offering to ourselves, to each other? Presence is the doorway to intimacy. And true connection doesn't come through perfection. It comes through honesty. It comes through choosing to stop abandoning ourselves. You are so worthy of deep, attuned, reciprocal love. But you won't find it in relationships where your worth is constantly up for negotiation. You find it by refusing to trade your peace for proximity, by refusing to perform in order to be loved, in order to belong. And that begins with choosing yourself. So if you're listening to this and you're realizing that you've been settling for breadcrumbs too, this is your permission slip to say no more. No more proving, no more striving, no more shape-shifting for people who never intended to meet you. You are worthy of real connection. And the more you own that, the more your life will rise to meet you in it. You deserve the fullness of love, not the leftovers. You don't need to settle for breadcrumbs when what you desire is the full feast. And I'll give you an example of what real presence looks like. Here's the feast. I was recently away for a weekend with one of my closest friends, and we made a conscious choice. No distractions. We often left our cell phones in the hotel room and spent the entire day just being with each other. And at times, one of us kept a phone on hand, but it was because we needed to check the time or pull an oracle card to look up two birds that happen across our path, signaling a sign from the divine. But otherwise, we were fully present, not just in conversation, but in attunement, in witnessing, in silence, in any stillness. Even when we weren't talking, we were connected. And the magic came pouring in because we were there for it. We were present for it. The signs from Spirit arrived not because we chased them, but because we were present enough to notice together. That day, that felt like a vortex of connection and depth and mutual care. We were held not just by each other, but by the field that forms when two people show up fully. That is intimacy. That's depth. That's what it feels like to be nourished soul to soul. And this isn't an isolated experience for me anymore. This is what I've now created in my most cherished relationships. This vortex of love and depth and present and connection that is so rich, time and space completely disappear. We leave our calls feeling deeply nourished, deeply seen, deeply heard, deeply held. Our cups don't just pour into each other. They inspire one another to keep filling from within. We choose ourselves and we choose each other. This is what I call in now, not because I'm lucky, but because of who I've become. And maybe that's part of why these relationships I have now feel so sacred, because for a long time, I wasn't seen in my own becoming. In that former relationship, she never got to know the parts of me that were shifting. She couldn't see the changes I was making, how I was growing, how I was showing up with more vulnerability and courage. She kept relating to who I had been, not who I was becoming. And that created a rupture that I didn't know how to name at the time because I was working so hard to grow. And it hurt that someone I trusted and admired couldn't see or reflect that growth back to me. But that pain is exactly what brought me back to myself. And this is the most important truth of all, because to create this level of connection with others, I had to become that presence. I had to become that depth and that intimacy within me. I became the connection I was searching for. And to do that, I had to stop outsourcing my worth to people who couldn't see me, and I had to turn inward. I cultivated a depth of presence within myself and with spirit that I had spent years trying to earn from others. And from that place, from that root of self-honoring and self-trust, everything became clear. What I needed, what I was no longer available for, and who could and couldn't rise to meet me in the depth that I had reclaimed within myself. Because that's what real transformation does. It clears the fog. It sharpens your sight. And it calls forward the kind of love that can hold the real you. So if you're wondering where to begin at the root. Begin with you. And when you finally meet yourself in your own depth, not bypassing, not performing, not shrinking to keep the peace, but really meeting you in your truth, in your tenderness, in your power, that's where everything changes. That's where the starvation ends. That's where the transformation lives. When we're present enough to notice, the signs from spirit come pouring in, because the presence that forms when we show up fully, that's what nourishes the soul. That intimacy, that attunement, that quiet, sacred being with yourself, that is soul care. Just being with spirit, with another, not just soul to soul, but present enough to notice, to witness, to feel the stillness, to rest in the sacred rhythm of attuned connection. And it's in that field of presence that magic comes rushing in. Because spirit arrives where the heart is open and the noise has settled. Spirit meets us in the vortex of presence, and presence is the altar. So become this connection, because that's what it feels like to be nourished soul to soul. That's what I call in now because of who I've become. I've become the home I was always aching for. So meet yourself there. Meet yourself now, like your life depends on it, because it does. It always starts with you. So I leave you with this. Don't confuse proximity with presence. Don't confuse distractions and busyness with real connection. That's not intimacy. That's a disguise. You are worth asking yourself where you are offering true presence versus where you're performing to just be enough. You're worth questioning where you're selling yourself short of what you deeply desire just to maintain some illusion of closeness. You are worthy of the love you pour into everyone else, and you certainly are worthy of more than breadcrumbs. Claim the feast. Claim the feast. If you're still here and still listening, thank you. I appreciate you letting me bring you into my pattern unraveling. And I want to leave you with this truth. We don't stop settling by demanding more from others. We stop settling when we choose to connect deeply with ourselves. When we rise to meet ourselves in our own depth, we change the standard. We shift the frequency. We become the kind of connection we crave. And from that place of deep self-worth, we stop begging to be seen because we're already home within ourselves. So my invitation to you is this. Where are you offering presence? Where are you settling for performance? Where are you starving for connection, but refusing to feed your own soul first? When you stop outsourcing love and choose to become it, everything changes. That's where transformation truly lives. And that's exactly what I'm calling in now because of who I've become. And my hope is that you believe you're worthy enough to claim that for yourself too. I'll see you in the next episode. Until next time, bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.